I'd now like to introduce Professor Ernst, who will be speaking on Case Study of the Bahr al-Hayat. And just so I remember to tell you before we leave, Jim Mallinson and Carl Ernst and I and our IT staff at the museum have collaborated on a website that posts for the first time, well, the first time translation of the text of the Bahr al-Hayat and all 21 folios from the Chester Beatty Library manuscript. And, well, inshallah, it's going live today.
Wow. Thank you so much, Debra, and I really appreciate you bringing me into this project. I've been involved with this subject for quite some time, and it has been such an intricate one that I have at times despaired of being able to pull it all together. And so I'm hoping at some time in the near future to give you the full monograph on Muslim interpreters of yoga. But what I'm going to do today is linked to my piece in the catalog and to the upcoming website in order to talk about the role of the asanas in this particular text. One of the most striking aspects of the transmission and expression of yogic teachings and practices has been the engagement of Muslim interpreters with the traditions of yoga, a phenomenon that challenges conventional notions of religious boundaries. The story of how this encounter took place is a complex one, which centers particularly on an Arabic text offering a translation of an otherwise unidentified Indian text known as the Pool of Nectar or Amrita Kunda. The Arabic version, known among other titles as the Pool of the Water of Life, was probably completed around the beginning of the 16th century by an anonymous translator who was deeply immersed in Islamic philosophy. Widespread interest in this text is indicated by the appearance of several translations into other languages, including Ottoman Turkish, Persian, and eventually Urdu. The most famous of the Persian translations, which claims our attention today, was entitled The Ocean of Life, or Bahr al-Hayat, written by or under the direction of the eminent Sufi master of the Shattari order, Sheikh Muhammad Ghaus Gwaliori, probably in 1550 when he was residing in Gujarat. Although the Bahr al-Hayat claims to be a translation of the Arabic Pool of the Water of Life, it represents a significant advance in terms of its descriptions of the postures of yogic practice. Whereas the Arabic version discussed 5 positions out of the total of 84 claimed in yogic tradition. Let's see, we'll come back to that in a second. An account mostly followed by an earlier Persian translation, the Bahr al-Hayat announces 21 postures and goes on to present verbal descriptions of 22, all of which are described in terms drawing simultaneously on the vocabularies of Persianate Sufism and Hatha Yoga. Most notably, several manuscripts of the text are illustrated with miniature paintings in Mughal style. The most prominent of these illustrated manuscripts, held in the Chester Beatty Library collection, has been plausibly dated to around 1602 as one of the Persian texts on Indian themes produced for the Mughal prince Salim, later Jahangir, in the atelier of Allahabad. And just a word about these manuscripts. The one that's marked as a private collection is believed to be from the collection of the late Simon Digby, although I don't know what has happened to the manuscript. And the one which is now at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I heard about from Simon Digby when I was in London about 15 years ago. And he called me up to say I needed to go down to a rare book dealer to look at a manuscript, which he feared was the one from Salarjung Library in Hyderabad, stolen. And since he said he knew that I was the only one who had seen that Hyderabad manuscript, he wanted me to check the one at the book dealers to see if it was indeed stolen, and I saw that it was not the same. It was older and better, and when when the dealer said that it was available, I went back to UNC and talked the rare book collection into picking it up. So come on down to Chapel Hill and visit us, and you can have a look. Now, the program of 21 illustrations of yogic postures from the 4th chapter of the Bahr al-Hayat, quite possibly based on using contemporary ascetics as models, set the template followed by the 3 other known illustrated copies of the text. So as you can see, on the left we have the Chester Beatty copy, and this leaf is on display right now. On the right is the UNC copy, which, as you can tell, is a rather simpler composition and is in fact missing a certain items like the necklace around the yogi's neck and so forth. But it's unmistakably the same program. Both the text and the illustrations of the Bahr al-Hayat furnish a valuable source of information on yogic practices, illuminating obscure points that are found in the Sanskrit texts, while at the same time revealing how yoga was understood through a hermeneutic based on Sufism. And most of this presentation is going to be about the text, but I do want to allude to a couple of other manuscripts which are illustrations which are from the same period and which may in fact have been commissioned by Jahangir at the same time. One on the left is a manuscript called Dvadasa Bhava, or the 12 Existences, and certain leaves of this have appeared at auction, and I don't know where they are at the moment, but this one features the goddess Kamakya, who features prominently in all the translations of the Pool of Nectar texts. And the one on the right shows some yogis who look remarkably similar to the people who are depicted in our manuscript, and so it could indeed proceed from the same source. But I won't be going into the art history side. I'm going to leave that to other people who are better at that. While manuscripts of the Pool of the Water of Life contain a number of diagrams for visualization, none of those pertain to the 4th chapter on yogic postures, and that's the section that's going to appear on the website, the 4th chapter, about 10 pages. In that chapter, the postures are prefaced by an introductory section on the importance of controlling the sensory attachments of the soul, cleaning and purifying the body, and preparation by fasting, solitude, and systematic practice. The 5 postures introduced there, this is the Arabic version, are not named, but they closely resemble some of the asanas, seated postures known today as Padmasana or lotus posture, and several others. The text maintains that the yogic phrase alak, meaning pure, stainless, is to be recited continuously in all 5 positions. So there's great emphasis on what we may call the mantra aspect. Alak, ingeniously, is said to mean Allah, a disingenuous translation that takes advantage of the very close resemblance of these 2 words when written in the Arabic script. Results of these practices include visions, healing, spiritual transformation of the body, fearlessness, and levitation. The account of yogic postures in the Bahr al-Hayat is much more ambitious. A similar effort to revise and expand the material from the Arabic Pool of Nectar is characteristic of the other translations of the text. Muhammad Ghaus, like the authors of several other Persian translations of the Arabic, expresses frustration with the inaccuracies of previous versions, doubtless in part because of the shortcomings of the Arabic and Persian script for transcribing Hindi mantras correctly. He also makes it clear that he made recourse to contemporary yogis to obtain authoritative knowledge that would allow him to correct and enlarge the description of postures beyond what was found in the Arabic text. Here is his description of his approach to the translation, referring to himself in the 3rd person. The previous translator wrote the unintelligible Indian words, that is, the mantras, in a mixed-up fashion so that the minds of men and imaginations of colleagues did not reach from the words through their meanings to the goal. This poor man, Muhammad Ghaus, went to Kamarupa, or Assam, and spent several years in the study and realization of this science to the necessary degree, and he put it into practice. After some time, it occurred to this slave and several residents of Broach, the town of Broach in Gujarat, requested that because in this book most of the sciences are established, but most of the words have become unintelligible, he should completely correct it. Therefore, having heard it from the tongue of the yogis, he put it into writing and he named the book The Ocean of Life, or Bahr al-Hayat. This text attained some popularity in Sufi circles, particularly in the Shattari order, through which knowledge of these practices was spread to the Middle East and even to North Africa. The different Persian translations adopt distinct approaches in their descriptions of yogic postures, giving varying degrees of emphasis to the prominence of physical postures in relation to the verbal formulas. One of the other translators uses the Hindi phrase chaurasi baitak for the 84 seated postures belonging to the 84 yogis, suggesting a familiarity with Indic sources beyond what is mentioned in the Arabic text. Following the terminology of the Arabic pool of nectar, the Bahr al-Hayat loosely refers to 84 seated positions using the Arabic and Persian term jalsa. However, the 22 detailed descriptions do not refer to these practices primarily as positions of the body, but mainly treat them instead as the recitation of ritual formulas that happen to be accompanied by physical gestures, and in some cases, breathing exercises. In the majority of cases, they are announced in a hybrid fashion by juxtaposing the Hindi term shabda, or word, with the Arabic zikr, or recollection. Although both terms refer primarily to practices of oral chanting, they function here as synecdoches for the yoga postures. Each of the 22 practices has a Hindi name, some of which are difficult to reconstruct from the manuscripts, and I'll show you how hard in a subsequent slide. And 10 of the names are provided with translations in Persian, sometimes quite imaginative. Moreover, in 7 cases, the word of recollection, the shabda zikr, is explained in terms of postures that are explicitly called asanas. And the last 5 practices are introduced with a formula including the word asana, as in the case of number 18, which is called the recollection of the sahasa asana. So that means that actually about 12 of the 22 are called asanas at some point in the text. The description of these practices in some cases draws heavily on Islamic and Sufi themes, although some accounts are much briefer and purely descriptive. Let's see. Oh, yeah. This is what happens when you get 6 different manuscripts of this text and you try to figure out what the actual word is. There was one manuscript in the India Office Library that had a Hindi, a Devanagari transcription of most of the names in the margins. But they're very uneven in the spelling and sometimes wildly wrong. And I think I failed to mention that there's one leaf missing from the Chester Beatty manuscript copy, which is why it only has 21 illustrations of 22 postures. Okay. The Arabic pool of nectar had entitled the 4th chapter on the manner of knowing discipline, using the Arabic term riyada, or Persian riyazat, discipline, as a standard equivalent for yoga. With what appears to be a nod in the direction of Sufi meditation techniques, Muhammad Ghaus expands this title to on the knowledge of the heart and the character of discipline. So adding knowledge of the heart would signal to the knowledgeable reader that what follows would be expressed in terms of Sufi psychology. His complex strategy is also evident in the way he frames the extended presentation of yoga in terms of Islamic themes. I also found it noteworthy that the Chester Beatty copy in the binding contains around a central medallion 4 panels with quotations from the Quran, literally framing the text with the Islamic revelation, although the catalog doesn't tell us which verses are listed there. The lengthy introductory paragraphs of the 4th chapter likewise enhance the cosmological description of the body as deriving from the light of God, as mentioned in the celebrated light verse of the Quran. And the body as a microcosm is portrayed as the product of divine wisdom, also referred to in the Quran. And so bodily discipline, Persian riyazat or yoga, is necessary for both self-preservation and obedience to God. And there's a lot of other details which I'm going to start skipping over. But these scriptural references to purifying the body have a result that would be familiar to anyone who's trained in Persianate literature. And I'm going to give you an example now of his use of translation, how he presents names and terms from the yoga tradition and offers equivalents in Persian. Now, I'd like to stop for a moment to say we should be careful not to apply a mechanical or imperialistic notion of translation to this process. If we were to assume that classical dictionary definitions furnish the authoritative standard from which all other possibilities are deviations. As Finbar Barry Flood has pointed out, translation is a multi-directional practice of transculturation and exchange which affects thought both in regard to the source expression and to its rendering. And he says, translation as transformation has the advantage of displacing a backward-oriented and often ideologically charged source-mongering with a more forward-looking emphasis on innovation and mediation. What this amounts to is that once one has proposed a translational equivalent into a new language, that in effect alters one's understanding of the original term. So throughout a text like the Bahr al-Hayat, it is hard to tell if one is dealing with an Islamizing Sufi twist on a yogic concept, the other way around, or both at once. The problem of translation is evident in the description of the first posture, which I'm going to quote here at length, and I think that he actually decided to make this kind of a tour de force as he introduced these topics. The recollection, zikr of Hans, that is the first spiritual state of the yogis. They teach this practice to their students, and in this generosity appears. In their technical terms, they call recollection a practice, karma, and they call asceticism and abstemiousness dharma. Their piety is to become separate from attachments and impediments, with an ascetic's rag on the breast, a covering on the waist, dust scattered on the head, and face smeared with ash. They are distinguished from the people of the world. From nothingness, they see the whole of existence. They have grasped the thread of unity from end to end. Internal and external have a single meaning. Imagination, thought, and concept have taken on a single form. And with all peaceful beauty, whatever comes from the beloved is worthy, and one understands the posture. The posture of this practice, this karma, they call sahaj asana, let it be revealed. And here's the description. One holds the head. Wait a second, do we have the, yeah, here we go. One holds the head, waist, and back even, and one meditates, placing one shin over the other, holding the left ankle under the point of the right knee, and placing the right ankle under the point of the left knee, clasping both hands together. When exhaling, one says Hans, and Hans is an expression for the spiritual Lord. So this is an Arabic phrase, Rab Ruhi. When inhaling, one says Soham, and Soham is the expression for Lord of Lords, Arabic Rab al-Arbab. When the spiritual Lord takes the form of the Lord of Lords, a single manifestation becomes apparent with every beauty. It becomes the locus of witnessing, unveiling, and vision. Most people need to persist in this recollection to open the door to the hidden of the hidden. The goal of the spiritual state of this point is this. So that is the Hans asana. Now, I won't go into a detailed commentary on it. Because I want to show you a couple of more pictures. But it is difficult to say, textually speaking, what the precedents are for the Bahr al-Hayat. The names of the yogic asanas employed by Muhammad Gauss are not always easy to establish, as we have seen. And these names do not correspond to the list of postures in the best-known works of Hatha Yoga, such as the Hatha Pradipika, which Jim was talking about earlier. Those texts, dated from the 15th century described a number of asanas, but far fewer than the traditional number of 84. But as Jason Birch has recently pointed out, there are a number of unpublished writings on Hatha Yoga from the 18th century that provide much more extensive lists of asanas, including some that are remarkably similar to those found in the Bahr al-Hayat. And so he very kindly shared with me a couple of his translations of other descriptions of postures. And so these are, I'll just give you this one as an example. From the Bahr al-Hayat, this is called, in the Persian spelling, sun asana, or corresponding to Sanskrit shunya, emptiness. The recollection of the sun asana: first one clenches both fists and places them on the earth, placing the toes of the right foot on the right elbow and the toes of the left foot on the left elbow. One performs the recollection. Whoever reaches this station becomes capable of flight and becomes one of the spiritual entities, and God knows best. If we compare Jason Birch's translation of the Yoga Chintamani, having clenched the fists of both hands and then having placed them on the ground, the yogin should raise his body up into the air and exclaim alaksha. Having taken the big toe of the left foot on the left elbow and the right big toe on the right elbow, he should put the weight of his body on the elbows. So actually the description in Bahr al-Hayat is a little bit more detailed, and if we put these together, obviously we're going to advance our knowledge of this topic. I won't go into the final example, and so I'm just going to close by saying that it's about time that we create a greater collaboration between scholars dealing with what have been classified as Middle East studies and South Asian studies as separate areas of inquiry. And I'm happy to be engaged in that right now with people like Jim Mallinson and Jason Birch and Debra Diamond. And so this is a textual document that is obviously going to enrich our knowledge of this tradition, and we need to take advantage of all the range of languages and interpretations in order to have the most comprehensive possible understanding of the traditions of yoga. Thank you very much.